Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Rafi Farber, and he is an Austrian school economist and libertarian, very important. And he has very impressive knowledge in our topic and also in the background, the historic part. And this is why I invited him. Welcome, Rafi.
Thanks for having me, Peter. Good to be here.
Oh, I'm very happy that you are here. I'm looking forward for this talk. And my apologies, I have the influenza. I hope it is not too bad. Okay, let's jump in. I have a few questions for you. So you are the Endgame Investor. We will talk about this later, but that suggests that there will be an endgame. So how could you explain for the beginners in plain English why there will be an endgame? What is the base of the problem? Why we will have a monetary crisis?
The basis of the problem is that inflation is stealing, and the entire system of exchange right now is based on theft. And when you have a society that's based on theft, that society ultimately collapses because you run out of things to steal. When you run out of things to steal, everyone gets poor, and then the political organization or the monetary organization or whatever is keeping society together dissipates, and then that allows free markets to pop up, across, around different pockets, and then you rebuild from there. So how to explain that inflation is theft is, it's pretty easy. If someone can just invent a claim on real goods and services and force people to use it, they can just invent it out of literally nothing, or say it's a digit or a piece of paper or whatever it is, and say, okay, now I can take this out of the economy and use it for myself. So he added nothing and he took out something. So then you have less stuff for other people, more stuff for you. That's the same functional result as stealing something. When you steal somebody's car or when you steal somebody's chair or whatever it is that you steal, you have it and they don't have it. And eventually, if you steal from everybody, they have less things, you have more things, and then you run out of things, and then they stop making things, and then there are no more things, and then everybody starves to death. That's the most simple way to put it. So I quote this a lot when I'm asked this question. In the library behind me, there's a book called Beliefs and Opinions by a rabbi named Saadia Gaon, who wrote it about 1400 years ago, and around 800 of the Common Era in the late Dark Ages. And he asked the question, why does the Bible forbid stealing? And he says this exact reason, because if it allowed people to steal and said it's fine to steal whatever you want, then what happens is you run out of things and then everybody dies. So that's the simplest way. So what is the end game? The end game is basically when the public realizes that they're being stolen from, they stop making stuff. And you could read Ayn Rand has a version of this in Atlas Shrugged, where the people that produce things, they kind of separate from society and make their own Gulch society in some island somewhere, I don't remember. But the end game is basically the end of the system of theft, because it cannot continue, because literally you'll just run out of stuff, and that's what's happening. And you can see that in the middle class getting poorer, and the connected inflation class, whoever benefits from inflation. That could be banks, it could be the military industrial complex, it could be the politicians' friends, or the insider traders in the Senate, which is or the Congress, which is all the same stuff. The World Economic Forum, all these people, they benefit from the same stuff, and they're all on the same team, just different factions. So the inflation is going to be ineffective, meaning when they print more money, it's not going to be able to claim any more goods and services. And then they'll lose all their power, and then there'll be a reset, but a reset not on their terms, but on our terms. And there's no our. We're not like one unit here that has one agenda. There's many different agendas because there's many different markets, and we'll break up into that sort of thing again. Just like the story of the flood in the Torah and the Bible. Whether you believe in it literally or not doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it actually happened. It's telling you that if you have a society that steals, it's going to collapse, whether through flood or whether through natural just dissipation. So that's where we are.
And so if I understand it correctly, then the money supply is increasing, and eventually it will lose the value, and then I lose the drive to produce more stuff because I work for nothing. This is it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's one way to put it. Yeah, that's a simple way to put it, and that's true. Yeah, there's more that can be said, but basically that's it. Yeah.
And the problem is that there are periods when the production of stuff is less than the inflation stuff, the stealing, and then and these periods are changing after each other, and then we are now at the end phase of that.
Yeah. I mean, this is the same stuff that kills any empire. The history and the stories of governments throughout the world is governments get more powerful and they conquer more places and they take tribute from those places, and then they get more power, get more places, get more control, and then eventually they run out of things to conquer, so they start inflating the money and stealing from internally from the empire that way. And then things start to fall apart, which is exactly what happened to Rome. It's exactly what happens to every government. They all clip their coins in one way or another. This is just a modern way of doing it. So if you look at history, it's the same pattern over and over again. Now you could say, well, Rome inflated for 300, 400 years before there was a collapse. Fine. So you could say maybe it'll last another 300, 400 years from now. But then the rate of inflation in Rome was much, much slower. It was like in money supply terms, they were clipping coins maybe at 1% to 2% a year, something like that, slowly ebbing the silver content of the coins away over hundreds of years of time. Here, it's much faster, and you can, because modern societies go much quicker than ancient societies. So what I believe is there's going to be one more round of inflation, meaning one more. By inflation, I mean increasing the money substitute supply. Increasing the money supply is increasing the gold or silver supply, which is fine. The reason it's good money is because it's very hard to do. You need to do a lot of work, and it costs money to do it. So you need to have a profit margin, and that's what naturally regulates the money supply according to what you can dig out. So that's why that's one of the reasons why gold and silver are good money. But increasing the money substitute supply, basically going vertical, then it has to continue going at that rate in order to keep the pyramid sustaining. Because the more money you print, the more layers of finance are built on top of this enormous pyramid, and then you have to build the base. You have to keep building at a faster and faster rate until you just go vertical. And we're very near the vertical part now. we're in the final lull, the final depression of the money supply before the next financial crisis kicks in. And then from there, they'll just print everybody will print to death, and that'll be the end of it.
You have to feed the monster what you created. And but so I'm happy that you mentioned that there will be one more inflation, probably a large inflation. But now, what we have right now is deflation, because the central banks are tightening, they burn money. But am I seeing it correctly that the problem is that the system is built for inflation and not for deflation? There are certain short periods of deflation, but they have to counteract it with inflation. Otherwise, all the assets fall apart, the economy, because everything is financialized. As you said the pyramid, they cannot take out the base of the pyramid. Is it something like that?
Yes, you're right. And now when you say inflation or deflation, when I say inflation and deflation, I assume we're talking about the money supply and not the effect of the money supply on prices, where you can see like your grocery bill goes up by 10% and whatever. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. That's just an effect. And this is not just an academic point. It's very important. So yeah, we are undergoing a very strong period of deflation now because the money supply. And I don't know about every other country. I haven't researched every country, but the dollar supply is definitely deflating now, and deflating pretty quickly. And you allow me to share a screen here, so I can share a screen of the rate at which it is deflating. So let me go there. This is the one chart I prepared. So this is a chart, you're not going to find it anywhere. I made it myself. It comes from my teacher in economics, Robert Wenzel, who was he was a blogger for. He owned the economicpolicyjournal.com and targetliberty.com. He passed away in May 2021. But his method of counting the money supply was he would take the quarterly average. Money supply comes out each week. So you take the last 13 weeks, which would be the money supply for the quarter, the average, and then get the rate at which that is expanding, and then multiply it by 4, and then you have an annualized, how fast the money supply is going on an annualized quarterly basis. So you can see here from 1982, right? This is going all the way back to as far as the Fed has weekly records. And here, this spike here in 2020, that was the most recent inflation of the money supply, and it was pretty insane. I've never seen anything close to it at all. Since then, you have this humongous collapse in the rate of money supply growth, and now this down here, do you see my arrow like circling it?
Yes.
So right here, this is the latest data we have, and I think the numbers are something like -4%. Right? We've never been there before, ever. So then you can see, for example, in 2008, on this circle here was when it last went below zero, right? And so that triggered a huge financial crisis, and then they printed money, and you can see that spike here. But this was much smaller than what we saw over here. It was nothing compared to it. So, basically every time we see this sort of monetary deflation, it means eventually there's going to be some kind of a crisis. Now, the only exception, you can avoid it, right, by massively increasing productivity, right? If there's some kind of historical anomaly where you're inflating the money supply, but all of a sudden there's this like huge new technology that you can just like pop out goods and services like nothing, then you're not going to see the effect on prices, and then the pyramid can keep being built without even the money supply expanding, and that can work. So one example of where we saw that was in the mid 90s, right? Mid 1990s, the money supply was falling because the Fed had undergone this huge tightening campaign in 1994. It was a very bad year for the bond market, right? Because they were hiking 75 basis points 3 times. They did that. That was in the mid 90s. And so you'll say, oh, well, why didn't everything crash back then? Well, the answer was because the internet was starting to get popular. It was really globalizing trade, and goods and services started to get a lot cheaper in real terms. But the falling money supply didn't really cause a financial crisis because everyone got richer in real terms anyway. Now, is that happening now? No, it's not. People are definitely getting poorer. We see it everywhere. I see it in my neighborhood. I see it in other cities. I mean, it's pretty obvious now. So when does this last financial crisis hit? Don't know exactly. I can't say exactly. There's some kind of hangover, it looks like, from the last inflation, like when the money supply increased by 50% annualized. So there's still some extra money in the system that has to be burned out. And then from there, it should be triggered, and it'll probably be in housing and bonds, something like that. And then the Fed's going to have to print regardless of how much the CPI or the consumer prices are rising. And then there will be a big dump of money everywhere. It'll be like Hungary now, but worse.
Yeah. So I also think that now the productivity is lower and lower in the past few decades. If I look back, so it is not increasing, and we have a lot of so the demographics is also not good. We have more and more old people, so they will not boost the productivity, and it's not like the women also go to the workforce. So yeah, that would be interesting. And then you say, and I agree, that probably when everything starts to fall apart again, so the economy would fall apart, then they have to print again, because that's the only tool they have, and they probably will do that. Otherwise, we'll see this, but this event is so rare, perhaps once in a lifetime, when this is really a long death cycle. Are there more signs that are already indicate that something must change? If you look around, do we see some signs
that it's imminent?
Or not that it's imminent, but that it has to come. It doesn't have to happen next year or next week, but there are signs that maybe they are not, but there are signs that something must change. I know when I look to history, I can point things, but do we see something similar today? Or
Okay, so there's a lot of ways I could answer this question. To me, I see signs everywhere, every day that
Yeah,
I go out of my house. I see it because I see the patterns everywhere. But you have to know what you're looking for. You have to be
yeah,
aware of it. So the way I answer this question is, I guess where I live, and probably where most people live, you see inflation not just in the money supply, but it infects every aspect of society, everything, right? So let's say education, right? You have all these people getting doctorates or going through academic forms and writing peer-reviewed science journal papers or whatever, and then but see, they all follow these academic forms, and there's so many of them. And you know, you could just like reword an article and rearrange the vocabulary, and then say it's the different article, but it's the same one, and none of them make any sense, right? So you have it's really it's an inflation in the education system. There's so many people in university now. There's so many people getting degrees, and they're all worthless, right? Putting kids through high school, they're not even learning how to read in a lot of places, right? So
how to write
you
a
just put
degree.
them through the forms, and they graduate first, second, third, fourth grade because they have to, because if you don't graduate, then the school doesn't get the money that's inflated from the government to continue the school. Everything is just, there's nothing real. Everything has been hollowed out. There's no there. I'm not saying there's no real education. There is still. I mean, nothing can be completely inflated. There's always pockets of quality somewhere you're going to find. But you have inflation of education, inflation of communication, right? Everybody's saying everything. You can put a tweet out on the computer, and theoretically the entire world can hear what you just said if they want to search for it. And there's tweets like every fraction of a second, and everyone's saying everything, and at the same time nobody's saying anything. Inflation of communication, inflation of education, inflation of food, right? You know, everything is take sugar and you just like dump it into a food, and you have people eat that, so it gives them very quick energy, but there's no nutrition. It's everything is inflated. So you know, and medically, right? You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to say any words here that, you know, people don't want to hear, or certain algorithms don't want to hear. But medically, doctors, are they really treating patients? When you go to a doctor in a socialized system, the doctor doesn't even know who you are. He's just looking at a paper, and he says symptoms, okay, checklist, this and that, and then FDA says this, CDC says that. I'll just repeat it, and here you go. You know, everything inflated medical care. There's no real care in medical care. There's no relationship between people. It's the same thing with money itself. The money is hollowed out. Everything that the money touches is hollowed out. So this has got to change, or society is going to collapse. And society is going to collapse, but that's not a bad thing. The current organization of society is going to collapse. Humanity is not going to end. And I don't think we're going to, you know, kill each other and there's going to be like a nuclear war or anything. I just think there's going to be serious reorganization. And the people that are not that have no skills or no real money or nothing to fall back on and no friends and no community, they're not going to make it. And it's unfortunate, but like, what am I going to do? All I can do is protect my family and protect the people I know and try to spread the message and wake other people up so they can have some real money and some real skills so they can get through it and be on the other side, which is, I hope it's going to be nice. I hope it's going to be good, but it's going to be a tough road to get there.
I definitely agree with this part that we have to change something, because now more and more people are depending on the states. They expect that the state, the government will solve everything, and in the meantime, the governments are getting bigger and bigger, and they are bigger part of the economy. And then, it's not effective. So it is not. We need a libertarian and more freedom way of thinking. I think so. I agree with you. And we have also a lot of debt. How do you think about the debt problem? We see record debts, governments, people, companies. Is that part of the problem?
It's a symptom of the problem, sure.
Okay.
So what I mean, debt is just borrowing from the future, right? So if you're borrowing from the future, then eventually the future is going to run out of resources. They're going to stop producing. So I was reading something interesting about debt here just yesterday in a way that I haven't thought about it before. I mean, I've thought about it before, but this helped crystallize it. So it's not debt really that's the problem, right? So let's say you go into debt to buy a car, right? And then somebody buys that debt. Who buys the debt? Maybe it's your credit card company, because now you have to pay interest to the credit card company. So okay, if you can't pay it back, then the credit card company doesn't get that money, and they repossess the car and sell it for a loss, and then the money supply goes down, or the credit supply really goes down. But that doesn't really affect that doesn't cause the money supply to actually, it doesn't cause hyperinflation in the sense of rising prices. Defaults will more often than not, they will cause prices to fall, because let's say, yeah, if you default on the car payments, then the credit card company repossesses the car and they sell it for lower, right? So prices will generally fall on a default, and you'll call that deflation. However, there are classes of assets that if they default, then it's the currency itself that dies. And so what is that? That's the assets that back the dollar, right? And what backs the dollar, or what backs the forint, or what backs, the euro or whatever? Well, these currencies are units of liability of the central banks that issue them. So whatever assets that are on the central bank balance sheet, if those default, then what happens? Then what happens is, like, let's say a central bank owns a bond, right? Owns a treasury, owns a mortgage-backed security. So the payers of those mortgages that are in that mortgage-backed security, they pay money to a bank to keep their house. Then that money goes to the owner of the mortgage-backed security, which is the central bank, and then that money goes to the central bank, and then they retire it, and it goes out of the money supply. So as long as the debts on the mortgages are being paid, or the debts on the bonds are being paid, all that money eventually goes to the central bank and goes out of existence. That's deflation, right? But let's say the mortgage-backed security, or the treasury, or the bond that is owned by the central bank, let's say they default. Then the flow to the central bank from that debt, right, that stops. And all that money that's supposed to flow to the central bank and be retired, that stays in the economy. And most of their balance sheet is then wiped out, and what do you got left on it? Whatever gold is left there, because there is some gold on central bank balance sheets. So what how debt is directly related to hyperinflation is when the debt assets that are on the balance sheet of the central banks, when those default, then the currency dies, and people end up dumping it, and then you're left with only whatever's solid left on there. And that's when gold and silver become money, and whoever owns them has the purchasing power on the goods and services that remain on the planet.
Yeah, I'm happy that you mentioned this part of backing the currency, because my next question would be, why the central banks cannot save us, right?
Because they're the source of the problem.
They are the problem, yeah.
And I can go a little bit more into that.
Yeah.
Theoretically, they could save us. They could, but they would have to just stop printing and completely, and then revalue. And then when the pyramid falls, they would have to revalue their gold holdings to say, okay, now it's not $1,900, $2,000 an ounce. Now it's like $50,000 an ounce, or whatever it's going to be. And then our balance sheet is completely backed by gold. All of our dollars that are out there now are backed by gold completely. And so the people that have gold, they suddenly have a whole bunch of dollars. And the people that don't have gold, they have the same amount of dollars that can buy a lot less. And then from there, you have the transfer of wealth. So theoretically, could central banks help? Yeah, by stopping what they're doing and destroying the pyramid. Are they going to do that? No, because they're part of the system. And if they did that, they'd have to probably literally hide somewhere, because people would want to kill them.
Yeah. I remember back in Germany, the German hyperinflation. It's not that the German central bank or the government, they were stupid and they printed a lot of money and they didn't know what will happen. But the other side, if they knew if they would stop printing, that would be even worse in the short term, at least. And then they didn't want to do that, and they printed. Yeah. Okay. So thank you. And you kind of answered my next question, that now that we understand the problem, how can we imagine this end game? How does this look like? There are certain possibilities even, but you go to the hyperinflation end game. That's what we will see at the end.
Yeah.
With this system.
Yeah, that's what we're going to see. Yeah.
Yeah, and could this be? But I have to ask, just to be on the other side, just for the sake of conversation. Are there other possibilities? Can they change the system before that? Because probably they can. So, for example, now we will have CBDCs. That's the future. It is also fiat money, so it will. I don't think it will save us, but could they say earlier that okay, now we link our money to gold, or are there some other possibilities?
Yeah, they could. Well, first of all, why CBDC won't work? I'm not saying CBDC won't exist. Maybe they'll have time to bring it out, and maybe they will. But maybe it'll even start being used. It'll be horrible, and I'm not saying that it's not. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's even not horrible. It'll be horrible, but it can't last because it's not a reset of the system. It's not like when they introduce CBDC. Okay, now it's something new, and we can start from the beginning. It's not the beginning, right? Starting from the beginning would be going back to gold because gold is the beginning, right? A CBDC, just very practically, what's basically how would it come into existence? It would say like central banks come together in a giant meeting and they say, okay, now we have all these people with deposits in their bank accounts. So let's say someone has $500 in his bank account. Now they have 500 digital dollars on a blockchain. So then what just happened? Did you reset the pyramid? No, you just built another layer on top of what already exists that still has to fall. It's not, they didn't go back to the floor. They just built on top of where they already are because it's going to be a one-to-one change, right? Nothing's different here. It's just the only thing different is it's more trackable and it's more 1984 dystopian horror. That's what it is.
Programmable,
yeah. It'll be bad, but it's not going to slow down the hyperinflationary process. If anything, it will have to speed it up. And as powerful as governments are, when they run out of stuff to steal, they will lose their power. Their power is the power of theft. But if you steal from someone that has nothing, then the power that you have to steal from that person that has nothing is also nothing.
Right? Yeah, it's good that you also mentioned it. I like you because you always bring another perspective. But I also have to ask how could we be wrong? So, for example, there will be a crisis because of the deflation. And then they could say, okay, now we introduce the CBDC because we don't let the crisis just waste for this opportunity. And then they say, okay, the old currency, what we have today, and my debt, if I have no debt, but if I have a mortgage, then my mortgage is still in the currency of today. And the new system will probably cancel part of this debt, for example. Could this be? And then they can kick the can further down the road for a time. So part of the problem is the debt, and they can cancel it with this way, at least part of it. For example, there is the euro, for example. I thought that it's a falling currency. It's definitely it's not. It doesn't have a good base. It's a mess. And they thought the Matteo solution for the euro, for example. So are there something that I say, for example, it will probably they can kick down the can until the end of this decade, for example. But can I be wrong? How could we be wrong? I know it's a very difficult question, but I have to ask.
Okay, I don't
just think out of the box.
I don't know. The only way. I'm not wrong on the logic. Okay, it is impossible that I'm wrong about an eventual collapse. Is it possible that I'm wrong that it's going to be soon, or that it's going to be a year or two, and maybe it's going to be 10 or 20? it's theoretically possible. The only way that would be possible is if there was like a huge revolution in production, just like the internet in the mid-90s that I was talking about, right? If let's say, for example, all of a sudden they figured out fusion, cold fusion or whatever, and now energy is free and it costs nothing, and then all this stuff would change and everything would be a lot cheaper in real terms. Then yeah, it could go on for another 10 years. Sure. Are they going to get to free energy and have the logistics to spread it out across the world in the next year or two? I don't think so. No. If there's some other kind of miracle where production increases phenomenally, then yeah, it could be postponed. Because basically what you take this down to a very simple analogy, right? If a guy's growing oranges on his tree and his neighbor is picking them off of the tree, right? But he's picking like 1 or 2 oranges a day and he doesn't notice. So then the guy will keep taking care of the tree and growing oranges for himself, and he'll be fine. He's stealing from him, yeah, but he doesn't notice it, so he doesn't stop working. But if then let's say his neighbor just like picks them all, right? And then he realizes he has no oranges. He realizes he's stolen from. So he's like, okay, I'll just chop down the tree and use it for firewood. That's destroying your capital. But let's say his neighbor's stealing more and more oranges, but like all of a sudden he discovers this new fertilizer that makes the oranges grow like crazy. So his neighbor can steal even more and he won't even notice. He'll still keep growing it, but he's still being stolen from more and more. So if we have that magic fertilizer that all of a sudden puts us back in paradise and we're in the Garden of Eden and we can eat any fruit we want and we're all running around naked, it'll be great. Is it going to happen? No.
Yeah, probably not. And that it's a good point what you just made, that investors behave, or people behave irrationally. So if they really would know how the monetary system works, the financial system works, there would be riot probably this evening. That's what Henry Ford said back then. So
yeah,
that's what was also my point, that they don't know these things that you do, and they just continue believing the system until they realize, and that process will be done fast. But we are not there yet. And also the dollar has privileges. It's not fair, but it's true, right? So yeah. These things are not against us. But so I think if you would ask me today, Peter, how can we avoid hyperinflation? I don't know. At the end, we are on track to the hyperinflation. We are on the path. I don't know, by kilometer 10, perhaps you think kilometer 30, I don't know. But we are not there yet. There are some possibilities where we could change the route, but I don't see now. We will see then. Okay, good. That's not, we are not happy, but we understand more what does this mean. And then, of course, my next question is that, okay, how can we protect ourselves, and why are central banks buying gold?
Well, central banks are buying gold because there probably are some smart people in the central banks. You always have they always have somebody there that knows something. It's not like everyone's an idiot. Most of them are, but they're buying gold because they're worried, and some of them see where this is going. I mean, how can you protect yourself? I mean, I'll say buy gold and silver, but that's obvious. But what's probably even more important than that is that you surround yourself with people that understand this and that agree with you and that are preparing like you are. Like if you have friends that are farmers, get to know them. If you have friends that can produce things, that are carpenters, that have skills, that know how to do things with their hands, use machines, be friends with them. And also for your mental stability, you'll need a community that will protect each other because you're all on the same team. And I've made so many connections in the past 2 years because since the world was put under arrest 2 years ago, during those 2 years of complete insanity, we all sort of started reaching out and saying, okay, like where are the sane people? We have to find them now because this is just nuts. And I found a lot, and you're one of them. And we're all finding each other. So this is how we're preparing. We are reaching out. We're making connections. We're building community. You got to do that in a local way, and make sure you've got your skill set. And I would say, most importantly, get out of major urban areas. Just get out now. Look for a way to get out, and you don't want to be there when it all falls, because the people that are around there, they're not safe.
And you particularly like silver. Why is
Like
that?
who?
But you particularly like silver. Why is that?
Okay, so
Explain
that's that. Yeah. That's the way I explain that is silver is basically the ultimate gold substitute, right? So the reason that the dollar works, the reason that the dollar still works, is because it still can purchase some amount of gold. So the dollar is still a gold substitute. So assuming the dollar is 100% backed by gold, let's just assume it's an honest dollar and it's just a certificate for a certain amount of gold that does not change. Then what's more convenient? Coming to the store with coins of silver, or coming into the store with paper dollars or digital dollars that represent gold? It's much more convenient to go into a store and to use the gold substitute that is trusted, because you divide it easily. It doesn't get stolen. You don't have to carry it around. All these reasons, gold substitutes are better than silver. But what happens in a time when gold substitutes are no longer trusted because they've all been inflated to death and there is no gold substitute? So then you can't go into a store with a gold coin and buy food. It's not going to work. You're not going to buy an entire aisle of food. Okay? Forget that, right? It's too valuable. So, and also dividing gold into tiny, tiny little pieces is also dangerous, and you're going to lose them, and it's not practicable either. So you'll need a gold substitute. And is a digital one and a paper one is not going to work, because we've just been in hyperinflation. Nobody trusts them. Okay? So the only thing you can use is a silver coin, because that originally, before there were gold substitutes, before there was paper cash, before there was, back before 1873, when the dollar was a silver substitute rather than a gold substitute, that was before 1873 when that changed. Then silver was the ultimate money. So there's going to be a window. I don't know how long it will last, when we will go back to the original monetary ratio between gold and silver, which is about 15-1. So when that happens, because nobody has any gold substitutes that work, then you're going to have to use silver. It's going to be more volatile than gold in the meantime, so you got to be ready for that, right? But when hyperinflation hits, we're going to go around to a 15-1 ratio, and it's going to be a lot more valuable than it is in gold terms today.
Yeah, and it will protect our purchasing power, because people will dump the dollar or the euro or whatever, and they have to go back to something real, something that has value.
Yeah.
Okay. And you see this process as it's a negative, it's painful, but it's the creative destruction. So then
Yes.
this system will burn away, and we will start a new one. And this will probably use gold or as money.
Yeah.
As it always does. And then okay. Well, thank you. I see. We discussed my points. Would you like to add anything else, or I can close up?
Yeah, you can close up. Well, if you want to follow me, you can find me at the Endgame Investor on Seeking Alpha, or my YouTube channel, Rafi Farber, or Twitter at Rafi Farber, or you can come by Patreon on Patreon, where I give a more biblical angle on these things, because that's my background. It was nice speaking to your audience, and hopefully I can do this again sometime.
And thank you for your time. And that was my next question. How can they find you? And also, thank you for being here and thinking a bit outside of the box. I think you explained it from a different perspective, and I like that. Thank you very much. It was fun.
Good. You're welcome. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.